Welcome to the Redirect Podcast. My name is Abigail Hewins.
And I'm Emily Rojas. The Redirect Podcast is a show where we shift the conversation back to books. We discuss themes from some of our favorite fictional books and how those themes show up in real lived experiences.
On today's episode, we're doing a book club episode where we focus on just one book. And today's book is Spare by Prince Harry.
At long last.
At long last.
So before we dive into our thoughts on the book, I thought it would be kind of cool if you wanted to talk about, like, before you read the book, what was your relationship to the royal family? Or, like, what were your thoughts before you read this book, maybe on, like, Harry and Meghan or all of that? Like, did you have any preconceived notions going into it?
I did. So I've always kind of just been fascinated by the royal family in the way that, like, Americans typically are. Like, in high school, I got up early to watch Will and Kate's wedding.
Yes.
And then I watched Meghan and Harry's wedding when that happened. And I just, like, followed them for a while. Like, I've always had an awareness of, like, the main members of the family and, like, how it works. And I watched the Oprah interview with Meghan and Harry.
Of course.
And I recently watched the Netflix miniseries or docuseries that they put out. So I was primed before this. Like, I knew what to expect going in. What about you?
Yeah, I feel pretty much exactly the same as you. I think there's people who are way more into the royal family, but I think I saw someone on Twitter compare, like, Americans following the royal family to, like, the way we follow pop culture, and I think that's how I follow it. Like, in the sense that I enjoy celebrity culture and celebrity gossip, I also enjoy the royal family, but I don't really, like, care enough to know a lot of the inner workings or, like, the peripheral family members, but I definitely woke up to watch the weddings both times, so that's definitely a good point. And then I did watch the documentary and, of course, read this book. And I would say I definitely had a more favorable, like, I went into it with already a favorable opinion of Harry and Meghan. Like, I know some people, maybe this changed their minds or, like, they had a negative view of them, but I feel like I always kind of thought that the hate they were getting was a lot. And
yeah, this was confirmation bias for me. It's like,
yeah.
I went in being on their side, and then I came out being even
Still
more
on their side. Yeah, exactly.
But to your point about, like, how Americans consume the British royal family, I feel like if I was British, I would have to, like, have political opinions about them too, and, like, should we even have a royal family? But the luxury of being an American and enjoying this kind of content is that, like, I don't really care. Mm-hmm. Like, the political stuff, it doesn't impact me. Like, my taxes aren't going to fund the royal family. So, like, leaving room for, hey, if you are a British subject, you might have a more nuanced opinion about this, but
exactly
not here. And also, I was going to say another thing, like, in the last couple of years, there's a TikTok account I follow called Matta of Fact, like Matter of Fact, but Matta, and she, like, exclusively covers royal stuff.
Interesting.
Mostly the British royal family, but also, like, other royal families in the world. So I've learned a lot of information from her. And so that's why I feel like I came into this with some education, like, from following that account. So
yeah. Nice.
I recommend giving her a follow.
And then, of course, I think all Americans have some affection for Princess Diana. Like, she is, like, an American stan figure. So I think that also makes you more endeared to just, like, Harry and William in general, like, the two little guys you saw. Like, obviously I wasn't even really I think I was maybe not born or barely born when she died, but we've all seen the pictures of the two little guys walking behind the funeral and stuff. So I think, there is that endearment because I think we all really love Princess Diana. So that helps.
And we'll get into all of that.
We will.
Why we love her, who she was. There's so much to say.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But I will say, too, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Before I read this book, I did not expect to like it as much as I did. So that's my biggest thing that I didn't expect. I didn't think it would be very, like, well written. I think, especially from some of the pull quotes I saw on Twitter, I was like, this is going to be so annoying to get through, but I ended up really liking it. Spoiler alert.
Okay. Gosh, there's so many things. I just feel like I'm getting ahead of myself, like, wanting to say more things about it. But, okay, one of the first things is I agree with you. I was like, so okay. gosh, we'll jump into this, but just like as a little like look ahead, he says many times throughout the book that he's not like super studious or like good at school and he
Hmm.
hasn't read a lot of books. Like he just never was like a brainy kind of person. So that leads me to leave like how is this book so well written for somebody who says they don't read?
Sure.
And my thing is like he probably orally transcribed a lot
Sure.
of these stories and
Yeah,
then just had a team of people write them.
absolutely.
So, I mean,
I fully
that's
agree.
100% like the
But
vibe.
let's just go. Let's just go for it. So I
Okay,
think we're going
so
to talk about this part by part because it is divided into three parts with like a brief introduction. So we thought that would be the easiest way, but we have a lot to say. So who knows how long this episode is going to end
yeah,
up
just buckle
being.
in. So let's start actually. I'm holding a physical copy of the book.
Uh-huh.
I think everyone's maybe seen, if you don't own the book, you've probably seen
For
a
sure.
copy of it.
Yeah.
Or you've seen the title, the
The
cover is what
cover.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I'll draw your attention also, Emily, to the back of the book as we get into the introduction in part one. On the back of the book, if you don't own it, I'll describe to you, is a black and white picture of a child Prince Harry in a like an army uniform,
Hmm.
and it says HRH the Prince, His Royal Highness the Prince on his little thing. This is going to say a lot about the book and how he sees himself
Yeah.
as some foreshadowing. So let's start with the introduction.
Yeah.
Emily, what happens in the introduction of this book?
So in the introduction, it's kind of like a scene from him having kind of returned to the royal palace. Is it for his grandfather's funeral? I believe.
Yes, this is
Yes, for his
Prince Philip's
grandfather's
funeral.
yes, funeral, and it's kind of like it seems like he realizes that after this conversation things are going to change forever, and he's out in the gardens and his dad and Prince William come out to kind of have a conversation with him. And through the conversation, he kind of realizes that they don't understand like why he would even want to leave. Like they don't seem to have processed any of his experiences over the last several years. And so he sets it up as kind of a reflection, but also like the introduction is for this is for my family, like to explain why I would leave the royal family. And so starts on such a sad note because that introduction is like you're at a funeral and you're saying goodbye and your brothers and your dad are yelling at you and it's just like a very dramatic but like very, very sad opening to this book.
Yes, the introduction serves to like explain, to set out a few things. Like, first of all, the shit's gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
And then also like throughout, even in the introduction, it establishes that he is somebody who's like deeply traumatized by his
Yeah.
mom's death
Hmm.
and how it was handled by adults following her death. And it also kind of establishes that like the divide, like emotionally and mentally, between he and his family. Like
Hmm.
he's the only person who's gone to therapy
Hmm.
by far. And
That's
like
very obvious.
it's very obvious from the get, and it's obvious throughout the book. And like to what he's saying about like you really don't understand. It's like it's just kind of showing the final break of like I can't do this work for you.
Yeah. But
Like
I'm going to try to explain it one last time, and that's the book.
exactly.
And
And
there's one line that I quoted here, and it's really also sets up this like relationship between him and his brother, which ties throughout all three parts. And he writes, this famous part that I think everyone's seen quoted about how his resemblance to his mom and his baldness is progressing with
mhm.
time. But he said, in some ways he was my mirror, in some ways he was my opposite, my beloved brother, my arch nemesis. How had that happened? And then I wrote, that reminds me of Hamilton. Like Burr, my first friend, my enemy, the last face I'll ever see, Like just anyways, I love Hamilton, but also it's just this reflection moment of like what he's been to him. You were my beloved brother, you've been my arch nemesis, but how did those two
Mhm.
things like come to pass? Like how did that not stay the same? So it really also sets up that relationship between them.
And it's like, okay, it's so unique because these are two people who have shared a life experience to some extent. I think William's role as like the quote unquote heir is different than his experience, but like they were both traumatized in the exact same way.
Yeah.
And it's like two roads diverge in yellow wood. Like one person took the word less traveled by. And one of them stuck to like what has been laid out for him and like the protocols and is not
Yeah,
breaking from like some of the toxic traits of the family.
exactly.
But another thing I wanted to highlight before we move on to part one is just how highly he thinks of his mother.
Mm.
And probably much more highly than he would probably think of her if she was still alive.
Yeah,
Like, no
of
one thinks of their
course.
mom this way.
Yeah.
But I wanted to read a description of her
Hmm.
that he gives on literally page 3 of the book. Although my mother was a princess, named after a goddess, both of those terms always felt weak and inadequate. People routinely compared her to icons and saints, from Nelson Mandela to Mother Teresa to Joan of Arc. But every such comparison, while lofty and loving, also felt wide of the mark. The most recognizable woman on the planet, one of the most beloved, my mother was simply indescribable. That was the plain truth.
That makes you want to cry. It's so sad. And I think how hard
Oh,
it must be. I mean, we'll get into this later, I'm sure, but like he lost a lot of memories for a long time about his mom. And so I feel like that's also part of it. Like his mom, like we said, is beloved by so many people. Like she is kind of has become like some kind of legend or
saint.
fable almost. Yeah, like a saint figure where we're all painting her in a better light than maybe what she actually was. And so to have to remember her also through that perspective of what the public thinks of her is like a lot to process when you're just like a little kid and then to grow up with that.
And he sees his responsibility to his family, like his wife and children now,
Mm,
and the life that he's leading as a fulfillment of what she would have wanted for him and
yeah.
what she wanted for herself
Hmm.
and what she was trying to build for herself before her untimely death.
Absolutely.
So that's a bunch of context setting because as soon as we get to part one, we start chronologically telling the story of his
Sure.
life. So he serves to say, okay, this is the end point, and now let me tell you how I'm going to get there.
Yes.
So part one basically covers from his birth to like being 18.
Yeah, till
So
he graduates, whatever high school is called over there. Till he
yeah,
finishes school.
second,
Yeah.
whatever. It's very confusing and weird. There's okay. Also, like to bring a little levity to this, I was really hoping there'd be a lot of opportunities to make fun of British people, um, and there was.
Not to
Namely,
worry.
namely, in part one, he describes being a boy and his favorite candy was opal fruits. Yeah, that's Starburst. Jail. Jail to the
What?
British.
I never would have guessed that.
Yeah, no. That's what they call Starburst, opal
Okay.
fruits.
Yeah, you're banished. Stay over there.
All right, so let's start. Maybe a good place to start with part one is his birth. Emily, what was the significance of his birth?
Basically, he's born and it's often recalled that his dad has said to Diana, "Well, you gave me the heir and the spare, like we're good here." So he's already set up I mean, I just wrote like in my notes, what does that do to a child psychologically to know that the only reason you were born, like, it's not because your parents wanted another kid. It's not
They didn't
because you
love
were
each other.
loved. No, it's not because they loved each other. It was because, if your older brother needs a kidney transplant, like they need a match, like, because nothing can happen to the heir. I mean, like, I think so much of this is like, the questions that I asked throughout this whole thing is like, whether, the political reasons of whether you need a monarchy or not, whether you need, a royal family or not. Like, let's think about what the institution is doing to children psychologically and is continuing to do. Like, there are still heirs and spares right now who are babies who, like, are having this pressure put on them of one of them has, like you said, the William figure has the pressure to be a king one day from the day you're born. Like, you have no choice. And then the other kid has the pressure to just, like, know that you're just kind of not wanted. Like, you don't matter as much. So that's the setting of his birth, is that he is just kind of the spare from.
Yeah, and he lays that out like that it is like kind of lore that his dad said that to
Hmm.
Diana,
Yeah.
oh, Aaron is spare, my work's done. And that he left the hospital to go meet up with Camilla, his
Yeah.
girlfriend, who is now the
Boo.
queen, his
The
wife.
queen consort.
Main villain of this story. We will get to
Yes,
that.
we
But
will get to that.
she, like, I did not, look, Emily, I did not want to come into this like being like Camilla's the villain
Me
because
either.
listen, Charles and Camilla, star-crossed lovers, they have a
Absolutely.
tragic story.
Yeah.
Charles should never have been forced to marry Diana if he didn't want
hmm
to. Like that's all horrible. But she is the drama.
She is the drama. She is.
We
I
will get
came
to
out of
that.
this definitely with a hatred for Camilla I did not have before. So we'll get
She
there.
is sucky, sucky, suck. Don't like. Okay. So another thing that we get, like painting his childhood, is that Diana is so loving and
hmm
affectionate and obsessively loves him
Yes.
and William. And that is actually like totally breaking protocol for the royal family. He describes a story of when like the Queen and
hmm
Prince Philip went on like a royal tour for months and months, leaving Charles at home with his nanny. And when they came home, his mom offered him a handshake. The
Yes.
Queen offered Prince Charles, or now King Charles, a handshake.
Yes.
So, like, the fact that she was so loving was like
And then to
weird.
have that ripped away from you, like your only source of literal hugs as a child. Like the only person who will hug you. Like you can understand a lot about them. Another anecdote that highlights that though, I thought was the his dad like who would leave letters on his pillow but like never tell
Mm.
him anything nice in person. So he said on occasion after a long multi-course dinner I'd walk upstairs and find a letter on my pillow. The letter would say how proud he was of me for something I'd done or accomplished. I'd smile, place it under my pillow, but also wonder why he hadn't said this moments ago while seated directly across from me. It's like that also sets the tone of like you don't hug, you don't like show affection, you at all times, even in private, like with your own family, like maintain this like separation of yourself from those like more, I don't know, like human things of just love and, anger or sadness or any of those emotions. Like you keep that distinction between yourself and the rest of the world.
It's crazy. I mean, and like, also, you want to think of these people as just people too.
Yeah.
And like, there is something to be said about like, you make improvements like through generations. Like you just try to do a little bit better than your parents. And like
hmm
maybe for Charles, leaving those little letters saying that he
Yeah.
was proud was like a little bit better than what he got from his parents. I will note that like a lot of the affection that he describes receiving from his father is based on like applauding work that he's done or things
hmm
he's achieved,
hmm
and less him just being who he is,
Yeah.
which I think also like that will mess you up.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, like so he's part of this really dysfunctional family. His mom is totally obsessed with him. He's somewhat aware that like there is some tension and like he's not in a happy home with his parents, but he's a little bit younger than William. He doesn't like fully grasp what that
hmm
is. And at some point when he's young, his parents get divorced, and that's kind of the reality that he knows.
Yeah. And then, soon after, she obviously passes away. And so that is also heavily delved
Yes.
into in this part.
So yeah, in 1997, he describes being at Balmoral Castle, one of the royal family's homes in Scotland, and his dad coming into his room at night and basically telling him that his mom was in a car accident and she was not going to be okay. And he basically says that he like couldn't process this,
hmm
and he couldn't process it to the extent that until he was 18, he didn't actually believe that his mom was dead.
hmm
He thought it was a ruse allowing her to escape and hide away somewhere to get away from the paparazzi, the press, the pressure of it all, and that one day soon she would be calling on him and William to come be with her.
It's so sad as well. You can't, you can't understand how sad that is. I thought that was so interesting because, like, obviously that is also a conspiracy theory that, like, people in the world have,
Hmm.
like, it's a conspiracy theory. So, like, people have thought that. But to hear that, like, her own son, like, wanted to believe that and, like, how confusing that would be. Like, I don't know. It's just really sad. And I think, like, especially in a death like that where she was far away and it was so, like, such a freak accident, like, that would be easy to convince yourself that, like, you know, this didn't really happen. She's gonna come back. And
Yeah, he
then
didn't get to see her body.
yeah, one super sad moment that really got me was when he describes himself talking to William, and William's trying to convince him like she's not coming back, she's not. And then, you know, he's like William says she wouldn't do that to us, like she wouldn't just leave us behind. And then Harry says, but she wouldn't die either. She'd never do that to us either. And then William just says, fair point, Harold. That got me. I was like, ah, like I get that. Like she loved him so much. Like he believed that she loved him so much that she wouldn't even die. Like she would have somehow prevented herself dying to just be around for them. But obviously that's not the truth.
Right. It's tragic. And throughout the book, he gets more into like kind of his anger towards the press and really
Mm-hmm.
blaming the
Mm-hmm.
press and the paparazzi for her
Mm-hmm.
death because they
Obviously.
kind of did chase her to her death. But so like here's this critical moment in his life, this very traumatizing thing that would be traumatizing for any kid. But what you're dealing with is that now he's left with like emotionally out of touch and like honestly individually traumatized adults who have not
Yeah.
worked through their emotions, who are distant and detached from their emotions, who don't offer hugs or like anything like that. Like maybe he got like a pat on the shoulder from his dad.
Sure.
But then he's asked as like how old was he? Like 11? He's younger than that. Maybe like
Yeah.
not. I forget. I forget how old he was. He's asked to then like publicly walk behind his mother's casket and then like basically comfort grieving Brits
Yeah.
on the street.
Mm-hmm.
He is so ill-equipped to do this,
Yeah.
and the fact that he was made to do that,
Mm-hmm.
like the
That was
sense of duty
shocking.
came
Yeah.
so above his own well-being as a
A
child.
child. Yeah.
That is so traumatizing.
Yeah. Like as a child, you're never allowed to even have a moment to yourself. Is everything is about your duties. Yeah, like you said, it's about the duty, it's about the British public, it's about the press. It's never about like you as a human being. Like, you have no agency in your own life in any capacity. Even when your own mother has been like traumatically killed, you have no agency over what you choose to do with your life. Nothing.
His mom is gone.
Hmm.
He's been traumatized.
Hmm.
And the next like rational thing for his brain to do is
Hmm.
basically compartmentalize it,
Hmm.
package it away. He loses memories of his mom. He can't remember certain things about her. He can't remember big chunks of that part of his life.
Yeah.
It's all kind of just like put away. And then shortly after he's sent off to Eton, which is like a boarding school for boys where William also is.
Yeah.
And this is like another kind of chapter of his life.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting too. Like I was telling my mom about this, and I was like he doesn't seem like a kid who was not like you said, like doesn't describe himself as very studious, great in school. Like he doesn't seem like a kid who's naturally studiously like focused, but being in the royal family, you're like forced to like you have to go to the best schools and like you have to do this, and it's like maybe he would have been much happier just like, going to like a normal chill school,
That doesn't
but
matter.
no, like you again, you're who you are, like who you are as an individual plays no role in what happens in your life. You just gotta do what you're supposed to do.
And you have no framework for understanding that.
Yeah, because you're a kid.
So, but so one good thing is that he goes off, he has friends, he has kind of like distractions. Um he kind of gets away from it. He gets away from the press
Yeah,
mostly. Like
mostly for a
mostly. I
time.
mean, not for part of it, he gets to be like a normal kid,
Hmm.
a normal student in a normal school. No one's calling him His Royal Highness. No one's like, everyone's just calling him Harry,
Yeah.
and he just gets to be another student in class.
Hmm.
And this kind of is foreshadowing for why he finds such a home in the army, I think, where
Yeah.
he just kind of gets to be like a normal person to his extent. Like he just gets to be another name and like gets to be a
Yeah,
true peer.
definitely.
Foreshadowing for part two. But So during this time, so now Camilla has passed, I mean, not Camilla, Diana
Uh,
has passed on. And now Charles can openly date Camilla.
Thumbs down.
So Emily, maybe for some people who aren't as like brainwashed about this as us, can you describe like a brief, like 15-second history on Charles and Camilla?
You mean you haven't listened to multiple multi-part podcasts detailing
You haven't watched
Princess
every episode of
Diana's
The
life?
Crown?
Yeah. I've never seen The Crown, to be fair, but
Oh, you totally
I
should.
need to. I need to. Anyways, so basically Charles and Camilla, they were in love before he was with Diana, but not allowed to marry because she was divorced. Is that why? Or older, or there was some reason they didn't want them.
She was basically not a virgin.
Ah, okay. So she had a bad press. I think she was a little older or whatever, and they wanted him with like a younger, person. And Diana was super young when they married.
She's
I
like
think she was
19.
like, yeah, 1920, and he was a good bit older than her. And so
He was like
they,
32.
yeah, again, we hate on him, but he also, Prince
Had no
King
choice.
Charles, had no agency in his life. He wasn't able to marry the woman he married. There's a really disgusting leaked call between them, if you want to get into that. I wouldn't recommend it because you'll never be able to unhear it. But they kind of continued, they never stopped their relationship, essentially, while he was with Diana, and it was kind of like openly known. And then, of course, Charles and Diana divorce. She later dies, and then Camilla and him get back together, and they are
And
now
there's
the king and queen consort.
and yeah, and it's kind of like sticky because even though at this point there's been a lot of divorce in the royal family, like as the eventual king of England and like the eventual head of the Church of England, getting a divorce in the first place was like a big no-no. So at first he and Diana just separated and then they officially divorced. But then it was like, okay, well, you can't remarry while
Yeah.
she's alive.
Yeah,
So then after she passes, yeah, right.
suspicious.
Suspicion. So after she passes, he dates Camilla like more openly and like she's around like
Yeah.
the palace and all that stuff for like years.
Yeah, for a
but
long time.
but it takes like a good maybe like decade. No, I think it was less than so Diana died in 97, they got married in 2005. So
Oh wow.
not quite a decade. But yeah, 8 years before the queen like finally allowed them to get married, and they had to get married in a civil ceremony. It was like
Yes.
a
They
non-religious
could not have
ceremony.
a church wedding or whatever. It's just like super. It is as much as I don't like the way Camilla is in this book, and I'm taking the words written here as fact. So don't I'm not critically thinking about that, but like I feel so bad for them in a vacuum because like they genuinely seem to really love each other, and to
Totally.
not be able to marry the person you love and have to marry this person who, like, Diana was great on many accounts, but also by many accounts, like, deeply struggled with mental illness,
Immature.
Yeah, she was
So
a
young.
kid. She was a
I mean,
kid.
the whole thing
Yeah.
is tragic. Like,
Yeah.
he should have not been forced to marry someone he didn't want to marry.
Yeah.
And it's not fair for Diana,
No.
but it wasn't fair for him. Like the whole thing is just messed up. And
Yes.
Harry even says in this book that perhaps he even like conjectures perhaps like fate would have brought them together anyway. Like
Yeah.
maybe that's what fate originally had intended
Yeah.
for my dad.
So,
And so they wanted him
yeah.
to be happy.
Yeah.
Them being William and Harry. They
Absolutely.
wanted him to be happy. On the other hand, they didn't really see a need for them to get married, and they didn't really want that.
Sure. That makes total sense, I guess, in the context they're in.
So they had been aware of who she was, but they had actually never met her.
That was weird.
That was weird until they were like in high school.
Yeah.
Or I guess like, yeah, like adolescents, teenagers. And they then do one-on-one visits, William and Harry, with Charles and Camilla to kind of like get to know Camilla. So they both hang out and whatever, and like they talk about it and they're like, yeah, it's fine, I guess. Like she put in an effort, I guess it's fine. Harry says he can't remember a lot about the conversation. But following their meetings, there's reporting about it in the tabloids.
Yes.
And the only logical person who could have informed the press about one-on-one conversations that she had with Harry or with William was Camilla.
Yeah. And this
So
definitely
from
starts a long journey of
it's a pattern.
Camilla basically controlling the press.
So basically, she starts. This is the beginning of a long path of her leaking stories to the press
And we
to
can't
make
just say just her. Like, obviously, Charles is in on this. You know, he has to at least be
Yeah,
complicit in it. But yeah.
yeah. Them as a team,
Yes.
probably her at the lead, leaking stories to make her and Charles look more favorable,
Yes.
and get more favorable stories because at this time their public image was really crappy,
Sure. But, you
and it
know,
is
the
kind of
proper
throughout.
response to that is like to maybe like go help some charities, pet some puppies, kiss some babies. Not to, I don't know, completely villainize a teenage boy in the press. A child.
And it gets dark. Like
Yes.
this starts off pretty innocuous. It's just kind of like, okay, that's so
That's
weird. Why
weird.
would you
Yeah.
leak a private conversation? But it gets dark.
It gets dark. It gets quite dark.
So that is like a little bit of a sprinkle foreshadowing for where we're going eventually towards back. Our end destination is back here at Prince Philip's funeral, and Charles
Yes.
and William and Harry are having a conversation. So all of this is leading back to that.
Yeah. And this whole stuff with Camilla like introduces as well like his truly fraught relationship with the press. Like it was already starting, but this is where it kind of like declines. And he said at one point, I wasn't a human being to them. I wasn't a 14-year-old boy hanging on by his fingernails. I was a cartoon character, a glove puppet to be manipulated and mocked for fun. And it's like this is the dehumanization of the Prince Harry and the press begins when he's only, a teenager, and she had a lot to do with
Yes.
that.
And throughout like his teenage years, he was just having kind of like normal teenage fun, like not doing anything super crazy, but he was made out to be a drug addict in the tabloids, and he was like made out to be like an alcoholic, that he went to rehab. None of
Yes.
that stuff is true by
It's not
his
even
account.
true. Yeah.
And what happens when he's like, hey, like, this isn't cool. Like, can somebody, like, he goes to his dad and he goes to like the powers that be. He's like, can somebody like stop this? And basically what he says is that his dad isn't necessarily really compelled to stop it because it makes him look like this widower who's a single dad and
Struggling with a drug addict child. Yeah.
yeah, and so his dad is like, well, it's kind of positive press for me. And that what they say back to him is like the family motto is never complain, never explain. You just let them say what they want to say and just tune the rest out.
And by all accounts, it seemed to me like Charles and Camilla used the press's story, like they were aware that they were going to run these stories about him using drugs and intentionally helped them with that to make themselves look better. It's not just like convenient. It was like intentional. And this part infuriated me because painting this poor kid who was just like, he maybe like smoked some weed a few times as this like drug addict going to rehab. I mean, it's horrific. And it's just the start of this like,
I mean, imagine your parents like letting your teenage struggles
yeah,
like not like trying to help you through them or protect you from them, but like exploiting them.
yes.
I mean, it's just
horrible.
burning bridges. And then like it comes to a point when he's finally trying to graduate from Eton and like get done with school. Like as we've mentioned, he said he wasn't ever like the brightest student. Like he struggled with school. He gets accused of cheating,
Yeah.
which he was then like acquitted of that accusation.
Yeah.
But it gets run in the tabloids, and he's like, that's the thing that hurt me the most. Not being accused of being a drug addict, but like I
Yeah.
worked hard to like pass school.
Yeah. Like it was hard for me and I put a lot of work into it. And then now you're going to say I'm a cheater.
And so that's when Charles says to him, family motto is never complain, never explain. Do you think, so like let's pause there. Do you think that in 2023 that is still the family motto and they are still abiding by that.
I would say yeah, because like it's becoming more and more. I see, like, I think the press now in a vacuum has turned on William and Kate. I have seen a lot more unflattering stuff about them in the past few years, but you never see them, like, they still don't do anything. Like, they never come out with a statement, they never engage. It's just like Stonewall. And I don't know that that's like the best strategy in this day and age. I think in the past, like things were a little different, but I think now celebrity culture in general is so much more immediate. Like we have so much more access to celebrities that I think the not engaging at all is kind of like makes things worse. Like I think Harry and Meghan, because they're doing Oprah, they did their docuseries, they did the books. Of course, there's some people who don't like that and still hate it, but I think it helps a lot because you're like, oh well, they're like at least we're hearing from them, and then to hear nothing from the other side, like it's not helping them, I don't think at all.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about the family motto of never complain, never explain is it's kind of like stupid because of the relationship that the family has with the press and
Yes.
how much they actually like leak stories or pass along information and they have this like symbiosis. So it's kind of like the never explain part gets me because I'm like in so many ways you guys are like basically doing deals and trading information and like oh if I give you this then like you won't publish this story or whatever.
Exactly.
So in that way, it's kind of just like, well, you aren't really even upholding that. Like
Yeah. No.
you are part of this
Yeah.
problem.
Well, I think it's so weird because like the royal family obviously is a lot older than than anything like the press the way it is today, the social media, the public having access to your lives, cameras, like they're older than all of that. So, I feel like, you know, you'd think at some point there has to be a reevaluation on their end because it does seem like it's with the Queen's passing, um, there's a lot. It just seems like it's going more and more to a negative. I know they've had some in some of their former colonies when they visited. There's been some. I think in Jamaica there was some like protesting and places like that where they're going to visit and they normally would have been like, "Oh, welcomed." I feel like the negativity is mounting. So I feel like they're using these backwards traditions that are older than the modern era by a long shot, and maybe it's time to reevaluate some of them.
Well, yeah, the whole idea of the monarchy is built around like God chose this family to lead this like empire, and so it's like their divine appointment.
Yeah.
And a lot less people today are religious in that way. And even if they are
It's
religious, they
like,
don't believe that that is true.
yeah.
And so, like, just it's just like there's as the world moves on, I think there's bigger questions now about like what's the point of the monarchy,
Yeah.
and I think that's like some like what Harry has addressed in interviews like recently, like around the press of this book,
Hmm.
is people will ask him like, do you think the monarchy is like still necessary or like good or whatever? And he's like, yes, no, I still believe in it. So that's some of the criticism that he's drawn is like you critique this thing so much,
Sure.
but you still believe in it.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Do you want to go
Anything
into
else from
part
part
two?
one?
No, I got nothing else.
Okay. Well, I had one other tiny thing, which
Okay.
was there's a little story about like him hunting,
Mm.
and it's really gross, and he has to like get blooded by this deer,
Oh, yeah.
and I won't go into it because it was disgusting, but it did serve a point to show his connection to nature and
Yeah.
how he considers nature almost like a god to him, and like that's
Hmm.
how he experiences the divine, and that's like a thread throughout the book. So,
Yeah. Oh, and I will say, just to end it on kind of on that same note, like he finishes school. This is the kind of very end. And
mm,
they're like, so what do you want to do, like, for your job? And he's like, can I be a ski instructor? And they're like,
they're
no.
like, no.
He's like, can I go be a safari guide, like in Botswana? I love it there. And they're like, no. And it's just like, it really put into perspective of like you think the royal family has all these options and like privilege, and obviously they do. Like no one's disputing that. But at the end of the day, like he can't do anything he wants. He ends up just kind of going to the army by default because like he just wants to like do these normal jobs and like isn't even able to do anything. And so I thought that was an interesting way to end and segue into part two, which is the army chapter, which
Yeah.
I would say, you could skip part two of this book if you don't want to know
I
about the
think
army.
there are big things here
Yeah, there
with
are.
about okay, so in my mind part 2 covers like part 2 spans from like his like graduates like if he's like 18
Yeah,
to like 32
till he
like
meets
right
Megan.
before he
Yeah,
meets Megan.
yeah,
So he's really trying to decide who he is as a person.
yeah,
He's trying to figure out who he is. And in doing this, it covers 3 parts, like I would say is like main 3 sections, which
sure.
is his army career,
Mm-hmm,
his adventures in Africa, and
mm-hmm.
how he like spends more time in Botswana and Namibia and South Africa,
Yeah,
and how he like gets into his conservation work and builds relationships there, which I
yeah,
think is actually the biggest part.
I agree.
And then also Will and Kate's wedding. As we've said, we're less interested in the army deployments and stuff. I thought it was really interesting that he really towed the line here of not getting into the political implications of the war in Iraq
Yeah,
and kind of avoided like blatantly saying the things about it that were bad politically
sure.
and really tried to keep the focus on like individual soldiers, their
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice, their sense of duty, like his relationships that he built, like
Absolutely. Yeah. That he was just, and I think there's been some weird Twitter discourse about him bragging about killing people, and I did not get that impression at all. I think it was something I wanted to bring up. I guess we can start restarting talking about his army career section, but like I think it's so weird because a lot of people go off to war and we never talk about what they did there. And like a lot of people, I know that front lines of battle are really different than they are, and a lot of people are soldiers not really doing any, like they're doing maintenance or they're doing office jobs, like there's different aspects to being a soldier, but also there are a lot of people who go to war and kill people. Like that's kind of the thing. Like
and that's
and
traumatizing.
that's traumatizing. And I don't think there was anything like glorified about it. It was really for him just describing like he really just wanted to do his duty for his country, and this is what he thought it was. And he had to kill people as part of that because like that's part of what people do when they go to war.
I think he was talking about it soberly. I don't think that he was bragging.
No.
I think that he understands the value of a life and he
Mm,
lost friends.
yeah,
He's lost a lot of people in
a
his life.
lot.
And he's close to death. So I think what he was trying to explain is like his it's almost like his relationship to death. And I think in a book where he's being so honest and transparent about things, I think he wanted to have this as an inclusion
Yeah.
of like I'm being honest. I took people's lives.
Yeah.
He served in multiple different roles in the army, and a lot of that actually had to do with the press
Mm.
kind of endangering him. Um,
Yes.
so like when he was first like going to be deployed, his first deployment got canceled because the press was basically like giving all this information about where he was going.
Yeah.
And then like these people in the Taliban were like, "We're gonna fucking kill you."
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I don't think we're allowed to say the F word on this podcast, but
I'll believe it. I'll believe
okay.
it.
Um, but like we're gonna like kill Prince Harry or whatever, so that had to get canceled. He was gonna endanger other people.
Yeah.
So like multiple of his deployments got cut short or canceled because the press was literally endangering his life and the life of other British soldiers
Yes.
by leaking their location.
Yeah, and I think also his descriptions of war serve to show, at least for me reading it, that like he was not there as a photo op. Like he was genuinely working. He tried pretty hard to like not talk about who he was with his fellow, soldiers and the people who were deployed with him. Like he earned his way. He worked really hard. Like I think it's important to him as someone who I'm sure the criticism a lot is like you never had to work a day in your life for anything you have. Like, I think his army career was important to him because he was working hard. And I think it being cut short, like you said, by the press was devastating to him, particularly because this was the one place where it didn't matter who he was. Like, his hard work and his merit was like standing on its own.
Yes.
Like him being the
Like
prince
he did
almost hurt him in this scenario. It didn't help him at all.
exactly. He did boot camp like everybody else. He
Yeah.
had to do the same training. Like when he wanted to, whenever he eventually became a helicopter pilot, he had to take 2 years like away from like his daily work in the army to train to become a helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
Like he had to do the same work as everyone else, and I think he's really proud of that hard work. Of course, he had a lot of privilege to be able to do that and still maintain like a great life and like, you
Sure.
know, there's a lot of things here that like
It's complicated,
allow
but
him.
yeah,
But I think
it's
what he's trying to
fascinating.
say is like he liked kind of just being Captain Wales,
Yeah.
like, and not being His Royal Highness Prince Harry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, so that was the army stuff. I mean, throughout his army deployments, like this is like he's on and off in the military, like throughout
Yeah.
all of part two. But throughout these deployments, he has a few relationships with some girlfriends, and all of them ended like well, all of them ended amicably. It kind of highlighted like the struggle of trying to bring somebody into your royal life
Yeah.
and what that exposes them to. The press it exposes them to, the
Hmm.
harassment, and like this tension between them of like, I really like you, Harry, but I just don't know if I can sign on to
Yeah,
your life.
forever. Yeah. And I thought it was really, speaking of girlfriends, I did not know he had dated Caroline Flack, who I knew because she used to host Love Island, and she unfortunately took her own life a few years ago. But I think, I mean, again, like you said, he's lost a lot of people, and like the press is kind of vilified in her death as well. Like a lot of people have said, some of the press she got contributed to her struggles with mental illness, and so. I think like that's just like I think that one anecdote will come back up later when he's with Megan of just knowing like all these women and seeing the struggles they went through just by being around him and knowing how serious it can be, and how he wanted to protect her so badly later on. So that was one interesting but sad moment.
Totally. Yeah, it's kind of just setting the stage for what we know is eventually going to come with his relationship with Megan.
Yeah.
Like how special she is that she's like willing to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Just kind of showing like the press is hunting him down and
Literally.
hunting down his
Yeah.
girlfriends, literally staking out at their parents' houses, like
Like chasing
doing
them.
harassment, like
Yeah.
crazy stuff. And it's just hard for him. Like he desperately wants to share his life with a partner. He
Yeah.
mentions that several times, like in his emerging adulthood. He, like in his 20s, mentions like craves the ability to share life with a partner,
Yeah.
but it feels almost impossible to do that, which is sad.
It is sad. And he also has one girlfriend who helps him to cry for the first time about his mother's death. So this
Since the
section
funeral,
also, yeah, like since the funeral, he has never cried. And so I think this
ever,
also
once,
is kind
about
of
one
like
thing.
a peek in his struggles with his like mental health in this part too. It's like not only coming out of the army, struggling with PTSD, really, really struggling with that. Also, obviously, I think PTSD from his own childhood and the things he's gone through, like not just going to war. And so I think this part two is kind of like, it was really hard to read at times because it was just like a struggle. Like it seemed like so hard. Him struggling to have these relationships, struggling to getting his army career cut short and like by the press, struggling to have relationships because of the press. Like so many issues with that, like kind of peaking in this chapter or in this part, whatever.
Yeah, and as he's building his life and becoming his own person, all of these things that he's shoved down and avoided and put away, they eventually have to come up somehow.
Yeah.
And he describes, some level of substance abuse to try and deal with them.
Hmm.
And like eventually he gets to a point where he's like, my anxiety from all of this trauma and stuff that's going on is so bad. I'm going to start going to therapy and I'm going to start meditating and like trying to
Yeah.
like do stuff to help me.
And there's one line I wrote down where he said, price you pay, people would say, though I never understood what they meant. Price for what? And I just like thought like at some point there has to be some discussion like what is the line between the press and the royal family? Because I think to a certain extent, I understand like the public is owed some level of like transparency and insight. Obviously, if they're paying their taxes, they're supporting them. But like, should the kids be involved like this? Like, there has to be a line. Like, this guy is traumatized because of them. Like, so much of it, some of it comes from his own family, but a lot of it comes from the media and the press. And so, like, I feel like they have not done a good job of establishing. Like, I think about presidents, like, people, the press tracks the presidents, obviously, but like, I don't really feel like the press gets that into like the children of presidents, Like, I mean, right now I'm thinking of Hunter Biden, but he's an adult
But he's also
at
an
this
adult.
point. But
Like think about like Sasha and Malia
yeah,
Obama when
like I
they were
think
like children.
I'm sure that the press did get into them some, but I think they were able to like go to college and like have somewhat of a life where they weren't being hounded to this extent. Like it is so much worse. And so I feel like what is that line? I don't know, but it is obviously being crossed when you're involving children who aren't doing anything, and really vilifying them in the press. So that was just my thought.
So to this end about like him managing his anxiety and like getting peace in life and getting away from the press, a big part of that is his time in Botswana,
Yeah.
where he spends a lot of his 20s in between his deployments. He kind of builds like a family, and it's like
Hmm.
you're just in the middle of Africa, like in the middle of nature. There's no press. There's no one
Hmm.
following you around.
Yeah.
He's develops his relationship with a couple called Tej and Mike,
Hmm.
who become like second parents to him.
Yeah.
There's a moment where he calls Tej, who is the like kind of mom figure. He calls her mom for the first time. Like
Hmm.
she's like, make sure you wear sunscreen and whatever. And he's like, okay, mom. And they both kind of just like stood there. I'm like,
Crying
just kind
again.
of came out, and he was like, "She'll be mom, but she'll never be mummy."
Yeah.
And that, you know, it just made me so happy for him. Like, I don't know if he would have literally survived without
Yeah.
having this like slice of
Like
life that
respite.
is
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
and just like his proximity to nature, his relationship with nature and wildlife is like really foundational for him.
Yeah.
I wrote a note here that Botswana is where he spends time with the people that he loves dearly, who see him as he sees himself.
Hmm.
They just see
It's
him
really
as who he
insightful.
is. And then more nature stuff. He starts in some of his charity work, basically like the British version of Wounded Warriors.
Hmm.
Like he starts doing stuff with like returned veterans who were
We're like
wounded during the
injured in
war.
war. Yeah.
And he does actually walks with disabled veterans to the North Pole and to the South Pole, which is so cool.
Yeah. That was something I never had heard about before, but it was insane.
Yes, and just like he got to just be one of the guys again, which
Yeah.
is so cool. And
And again,
one
that's
thing
another thing like you have to do on your own. Like you being the prince will not help you make it to the North Pole. Like that's on your
yeah,
own.
you got to do it on your own.
Yeah.
Um, he one thing that really resonated with me when he was on his trip to the North Pole, he had this revelation that life is just one long walk,
Yeah.
which hit home with me for sure. Of course, so his trip to the South Pole got cut short because he went to had to come home for Will and Kate's wedding. And that's when, of course, we know about the frost-nipped pee-pee situation.
Yeah, this is another moment that, yes, you guys are all talking about on Twitter, but just read this book for yourself because it's like one line, out of this whole book that's really obviously a lot better than that. And I mean, I guess that really happened, so what are you gonna do? You gotta talk
Yeah,
about
like
it.
he's just being transparent. Like he's sitting there on his brother's wedding day and is like, "Toja," as he calls it. It's frostbitten.
Another
Anyway,
L for the Brits.
yeah.
Speaking of those, before we got into the wedding, this Wounded Warrior thing, it also kind of is another inflection point with this weird relationship with William because he's like trying to get the funding to like start up this fundraiser event for these veterans and wounded soldiers, and then William's like causing all these problems with him and like trying to block him at every turn. And at the end of the day, it's kind of revealed of like this is just jealousy. Like he just doesn't want Harry to like accomplish anything on his own. And it was just such insane insight of like I would love to read William's memoir because I am sure he had his own trauma.
He has a chip on his shoulder too. I get
Yeah,
it.
but like it's just so bizarre reading it where Harry's like, I'm trying to do something for myself that's important to me for wounded veterans. Like, what can you say bad about that? And then William's like just causing all of these problems because he's just jealous. Like that's what it
Well,
comes
and
down to.
part of the chip he has on his shoulder is because he's the heir. He was never actually allowed to go into active duty,
Yeah,
where Harry
Harry
was allowed to
obviously
go
was. Yeah,
was allowed to do deployment. So
right.
it's like there might be some like resentment or jealousy there of like
Of course.
my experiences in life have been limited because I carry more responsibility
Yeah,
than you do.
absolutely.
And look, I'm sure all of that is extremely valid. I understand that,
Yeah.
like to an extent in my own sibling relationships,
No,
but
yeah. I have
also
a note
like,
about that later in part three
yeah,
of like we are the older siblings, you know. So there is a certain amount of me that felt also for William because I'm like I
I
can
get it, bro.
not to that same extent of being the heir, but I understand. I think every older sibling understands what it feels like to be like, well, I wasn't allowed to do that, or like, I have all this pressure on me because I'm the older one, and like, you don't understand what that's like. And obviously, you have to deal with that and not take it to this extreme to be a total douche, but, like, reel it in, go
Yeah,
to therapy, William. Don't marry someone who seems also problematic, and like, you'll be good. But there was a part of me that felt a little bit for William in some of these scenes because it's like, I do understand
totally.
that, but.
He has had a rough go of it too. Like
Yeah.
he has been vilified by the press. He has had a lot of
Yeah.
responsibility put on him. He's been traumatized. Like we get it.
Yeah.
Another thing before we talk about the wedding, just real quick. So when Harry goes to Paris for something,
Hmm.
some sort of games or I don't know, but he ends up driving the tunnel that Diana died in, and he
Yeah.
had a driver drive him through it multiple times. That was another part of his process of like understanding that she was really
Yeah.
dead
Yeah.
and coming to terms with that. At another point, he gets like his personal secretary to get photos of like from the crime scene.
Yes.
One thing that was incredibly upsetting about that was that he could see like flashes in the photo of her. So like people were taking pictures of her dead body without instead of offering aid.
There's a fascinating tidbit in here about how he and William wanted to reopen the investigation into Diana's death, but were shot down by the powers that be. This just fueled all of my conspiracy theories about her death. I mean, not really, but I just was, when I read that, I had to reread it like 3 times. I'm like, Harry and William jointly wanted, like, tried to reopen the investigation, and then that wasn't, I mean, I can understand why for perfectly normal reasons, like them just not wanting to engage with anything, but that was like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Like, I can't believe that. So that
Yeah.
was a shocking tidbit.
And he ends up going to Harry and to William and telling him that he did this, and William's like, I've actually also
Yeah,
driven the
exactly.
tunnel multiple times too. Like
Yeah.
they're both on this quest to try and understand. But then on the other hand, like William tries to talk to Harry about the death, and he's for like a lot of their childhood and
He
early
like doesn't want to
adulthood,
talk about it.
he's not able to. Like it's not that
Yeah.
he doesn't want to. He just physically his brain is not allowing him. It's
Yeah.
protecting him. So I don't have that many notes about the wedding.
Me either.
I thought nothing new here, blah, blah,
We
blah.
all watched it, you know. I did think it was interesting though that Harry wasn't even the best man. That was an interesting tidbit because I never would have guessed. Like I just assumed, like they walked in together, like he stood up there with him, but it seems like a lot of their maybe what we thought was like a cordial sibling relationship or like a close sibling relationship. I think that's how it was painted in the press, anyways. Like that they were close, Megan came in, and now they're not anymore. But it kind of seems like a lot of those, like that tension and that distance was built a long time before Megan got into the picture. So congrats to Will and Kate, another problematic woman who is testing,
We'll get into that in part
She
three.
she is riling up my inner misogyny because her and Camilla, like, we'll get into it.
So, really quick before we get to part three, the end of part two ends on Harry's 32nd birthday. He's down because he really wants to be married.
Yeah.
Like, he's not jealous, but he wants to be able to be included with Will and Kate in their married life.
Yeah.
Like, he mentions this several times. He craves having his own partner to like join them with and like have a foursome of like, you know, like just have his like group or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's on
I think he kind of thinks like
mushrooms.
he kind of blames. Yeah. He's kind of,
Go ahead.
I think he kind of like he longs for that close relationship with William, and instead of seeing it at this time for what it is, which is this William has this jealousy issue, he has this chip on his shoulder, like we said. He's like, well, maybe if I had a wife, like we could have that closeness again, you know? So I think that's part of it is like, I just want to be close to my brother. He's off with Kate now. Maybe if I had someone, like we could all be close and it would be better and it could fix these problems, but it will not, reader. It will not.
It will not. There's a lot of other tidbits here about like how he's low key living in like a dingy apartment in Kensington Palace,
Yes.
and like he's like doing his own grocery shopping and stuff. Like a big part of this too is like in the royal family, until you get married, you are kind of just like not that important. Like you need to get
Literally.
married in order to like be,
Have like your money or whatever.
yeah, whatever.
Weird.
Anyways, all right. So the end of part two, he's on his 32nd birthday. He's in California. He's on some mushrooms. He's sitting out on the beach. He's looking up at the moon and he's asking the universe for a change. And he feels like, let me see if I have this bookmarked. He feels that the universe is speaking back to him like, just wait. This got me, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know why this got me so much, but it really did. Like, let's see. It really like got me emotional in my feelings. Just like the universe just being like, just wait. Like you never know what's around the corner.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's relatable. It's like you really don't ever like it's a hope for everyone. Like in every situation that's been bad in any of our lives, I think, for the most part, you know that at some point it does get better or like something changes and you just never know when it's going to be until you're looking back. But I think this is really emotional because he had this moment and then now looking back he can be like, that was true. Like it did change. Like it was just around the corner.
Let me read this. Yeah,
Okay.
the end of part two, because it's going to set us up for the best part of the book.
Absolutely.
By and large.
By
Okay.
far. Yeah.
Then I stared directly at the moon. It was speaking to me, like the bin and the toilet. What was it saying? That the year ahead would be good. Good how? Something big. Really? Big. Not more of the same? No. Something special. Really, Moon? Promise. Please don't lie to me. I was nearly the age Pa had been when he'd got married, and when he'd been considered a tragically late bloomer. At 32, he'd been ridiculed for his inability or unwillingness to find a partner. I was staring 32 in the face. Something has to change. Please? It will. I opened my mouth to the sky, to the moon, to the future. Ah.
Love it. Part 3.
Okay. Part 3. Megan.
Megan.
So, this starts... If you've seen the documentary, if you've seen other stuff, he learns of Megan through Instagram
Yeah, which
or
I
through
said.
Snapchat.
No, I think it was Instagram.
Okay.
I said Prince Harry Finsta confirmed. How do we find out what his username is? Oh, right. No. Have your private Instagram, man. I support you. But he saw his friend posted a video of Megan, who was her friend, and he said, I wrote this whole thing down. I just have to read it.
Please.
This woman with Violet, my God. I watched the video several times and forced myself to put down the phone. then picked it up again, watched the video again. I'd traveled the world from top to bottom, literally. I'd hopscotched the continents. I'd met hundreds of thousands of people. I'd crossed paths with a ludicrously large cross-section of the planet's 7 billion residents. For 32 years, I'd watched a conveyor belt of faces pass by, and only a handful ever made me look twice. This woman stopped the conveyor belt. This woman smashed the conveyor belt to bits. I'd never seen anyone so beautiful.
No.
I know.
Please. Doesn't that make you just want to go in the other room and like smack your man across the face and be like, why'd you ever say anything like that to me?
Yeah. Also later when they're getting married and what he says there, anyways. Yeah, but honestly, I actually have known a few people in my life who they met because someone saw them in like a tagged picture on Instagram and then DM'd them. And I'm always amazed by that because I just think that's so nice. Well, it's like purely physical, I guess, but it's also just, I think sometimes you see someone, I've never had that experience, but I just think it's a nice thought of like he saw her and he instantly was like I have to know this woman, like I have to get to know her and like how special that is. I don't know, it's just really nice.
It's lovely. And the best part about it is like he describes a sequence of like their first getting together and like texting like crazy and like
Yes.
this improbable romance of like they go on a couple dates, they connect on so many things, and like they both have 1 week open in the summer. And
Yeah,
it
and it's the
happened to
same
be the same
week.
week.
And their first conversation ever happened on his mom's birthday.
Oh my God.
I was like,
Literally, this honestly got me thinking about like what like this whole look there's more of this throughout part three, but like your loved ones that passed on, like they really might be like with you
I
and
know.
like guiding
Well,
you.
then, this isn't even in the book because we don't get to this point, but I did just watch the documentary as well. And, like, I think, like, the day they announced their second pregnancy, I think was the same day that his mom had announced that she was pregnant with him, like, in the press. Like, it was the same exact day that it was published. I don't know, stuff like that. You're just like, I know, like, coincidences, whatever can happen, but I really think there is something to that of, like, that's just so special. And, like, what a confirmation of like this is your maybe his mom is watching out like you said. Anyways.
So they have this great week in Botswana together. She
Sounded
and
amazing.
they're in the tent and there's elephants and she's like kind of scared and he's like, "Don't worry, I'll keep you safe."
Yeah.
And this symbolizes so much of like couldn't keep his mom safe. He couldn't keep a lot of these girlfriends safe or even himself.
Yeah.
But like he wants to do for her what he has not been able to do for
Yeah.
others. And like it's I think that this is a big part of his story of like where his family is now
Yeah.
and with his children and his wife like and leaving Britain. Like he really was like, I am actually going to keep someone safe
Yeah.
this time.
And I mean, we're skipping ahead, but I think he genuinely thought if he didn't do this, he would lose her. And he was not like it makes total sense. Like his losing his mom and blaming the press for that and how he's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to my kids. I'm not going to let them lose their mom and I'm not going to lose her. I'm not going to let her be a victim to this. Like I have been, like my mom was, like other people have been. Like I think how can you not, again, like you ask, how do William and Charles not understand that? Like of all he's been through, he's not going to let that happen to Meghan. And then they were just willing to throw her kind of to the wolves and not see what that was going to do.
So, yes. And so backing up a little bit, like part of his relationship with Meghan is like he's meeting this really free person who barely knows anything about the royal family.
Yes.
Doesn't like, she's American. She's totally outside of all this stuff. And she almost gives him this permission structure to be free.
And to like
And like,
look at it through a different lens as well.
yes. And like, she is like in touch with her emotions and
Yeah.
like she helps him on his journey to healing. So like
I
up until
agree.
this point, he's been coping and I feel like now he's really starting to heal.
Yeah.
And, so she offers safety and security.
Yeah.
And like, kind of just like honestly, like a pathway of like creating something new. Like
Yeah.
it like it's individuation. It's like I'm now starting my own family and my own thing, and I can break away from these
Yeah.
cycles that are unhealthy.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I feel like people also have made a weird big deal over the anecdote that Meghan didn't know she was going to have to curtsy for the Queen. But I find that to be perfectly normal because, like, she met her. It's not like I would see if she met her and it was in front of a bunch of people and, like, she was sitting on a throne. Obviously, you would be like, yeah, I got a curtsy.
Yeah.
But to me, before I read this or before I knew anything about this whole scenario, I would have thought that they act normal in front of each other and like
Yeah.
they're like, "Hey, grandma," but no, they're still freaking curtsying for her in private. So I do
Yeah.
not find that to be weird. Like I would have thought the same thing. I would have been like, "You guys curtsy when there's no one around? Like, are you guys okay?" So, but yeah, I think also like you said, like she really does bring that new, fresh perspective. Something I wrote earlier, but I didn't mention in part one, I think he was talking about how they're always taught to maintain this distance between themselves and everyone else. And I think Megan is so interesting because she doesn't do that. Like, if you watch the documentary, there's a whole part about how she, like, personally just went to help. Like, there was an apartment fire and it had a lot of, like, refugee and immigrant families, and how she went and just would, like, bring them food and, like, no press was there, and how she's just hugging all these women and becomes like friends with them. And I think she kind of showed him as well how to like have this closeness with the people that you're interacting with that he had maintained this distance his whole life. So I just think she's such a contrast to the royal family with how she does like seem to embrace, which I think is very similar to like why people love Diana. She didn't have that either. Like she really tried to embrace people, it seemed.
Yeah. You can tell this is somebody who'd never had any ambition or anything of like being a princess
Yeah.
or like she
No.
was just like trying to do good in the world,
Yeah.
like trying to
And like
like
loved someone. Like she just
yeah,
fell in
like
love with him.
exactly. And like and she is willing, she loves him so much she's willing to go through all this, you know,
Horribleness.
whatever. So she's teaching him how to be more free, and it's starting to threaten his family.
Very much.
William doesn't understand. He's like, maybe slow down with her. Everyone's like kind of keeping her at an arm's length, whatever. And here's like a big theme for me. Breaking cycles of abuse and trauma in your family, generational cycles of abuse and trauma, will always get you labeled as a troublemaker.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to him. Like, he is trying to go on a different path, and the status quo is being shaken up, and everyone is threatened by it.
Not only
And
the
they blame
status
her.
quo but also the status quo of colonizing people of color, and you're definitely threatened by the possible princess being a black woman. Like that cannot go without saying.
There are so many layers to this. And
Yeah.
part of me makes like, so let's just start with Will and Kate for like, we'll go maybe person by person. Will and Kate have like a weirdness with her.
They're
Like
weird.
they have multiple sit down confrontations like before and after they're married, like about like rude things that Meghan has done that are
So
like
weird.
not rude. Like they're
No.
just literally not.
It's
I
also
mean, as
just so
Americans, we don't think they
yeah.
are, but it's like I think part of what it is, I honestly, this is my theory. They are jealous
Yeah.
of the freedom that they
I think
have
they
and
are,
like
yeah.
the like the healing that they've done. Like they're jealous of their liberation.
Uh-huh.
And so they have to make it their problem. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, and I think they're probably also like jealous that Harry and Meghan seem to actually love each other
Exactly.
because I would, by all accounts, there's problems in their relationship, so I'm sure that doesn't help. But it is so weird because I also like, it's just weird. Like, family, you do things sometimes that make each other mad, but then can't you just like get over it? Like, why are we having all these sit down talks? That's what I don't understand about the dumbest stuff. I would understand maybe if it was like some deep, like, long standing issue and you're like, we have to talk through this and work this out. But it's stuff like Megan borrowing Kate's lip gloss. Like, huh? Like, we're gonna
Like
have an
literally.
argument about this?
So Megan borrowing her lip gloss, which is apparently egregious. And then another example was Kate was pregnant and she like forgot to do something or something. And Megan was like, "Oh, it's okay. I totally get it, baby brain."
Yeah.
And I get that maybe there's a cultural difference or whatever, like you
But
don't comment on people's
still,
hormones. Still,
like
she
they
was
had to
like
have a sit down conversation confronting them about this.
confrontation with raised voices.
Yes.
And William looks at Megan at one point and he's like, "That's not how things are done here." It's like, Jesus, bro.
Yeah. But
Like,
I think this is like a deep well, like we said. I mean, a lot of people now are bringing up like you'll see like old interviews of William and Harry where William's just like subtly cutting down Harry in every interview when they were even teenagers or like young adults. I think this comes from a deep well of jealousy and anger and resentment
hierarchy.
and hierarchy that unfortunately I don't think Harry really realized was there until Megan came in the picture. And then it's so easy to channel it on her. Like you said, like she's the troublemaker, she's causing all these problems, when really Harry has been on his own journey this whole time. And she's just kind of coming in almost at, the end point of his own healing journey, his own liberation journey. But like, it's so easy to blame her because she's new and because she's,
The other.
the other. Yeah.
And like, so like you said, she is emboldening. So he's already started his healing journey and he started his journey with therapy and meditation and like charting a new path for himself.
Hmm.
She joins him in on that, and as a good partner does, she strengthens him and bolsters him and like encourages him on that journey.
Hmm.
And he's going to therapy and he's working through a ton of stuff, like big, big, big traumas.
Yeah.
And he's like the end part, like the output of that is evident to William, and he accuses him of being brainwashed and going
Yes.
to therapy for brainwashing,
Insane.
which is so sad. It's like, yo, like you don't know how, like you see someone who's again breaking these generational cycles of trauma and
Yeah.
abuse and all this stuff, and the only explanation for it is like you're crazy. Like you are the one who's crazy. It couldn't
Yeah.
be me. You are messed up.
Yeah, it's
And
really
jealousy.
sad. Yeah. Yeah, it is jealousy. And that kind of
So,
comes to a head when the two try to marry, I think. All of this. When Harry and Meghan
oh,
try
when
to get
Harry
married.
and Meghan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have a lot of notes about that part and like their wedding. So do you want to share what you have?
Just that kind of him, I had more on him trying to get married to her because he kind of goes to ask his dad, and his dad is super weird. Obviously, because again, in this world, in this family, you can't just marry someone. You have to like get approval from everyone. And his dad's like being really weird, like, well, is she gonna keep working? Because I don't know if there's enough money for you guys. It's just like,
What?
okay. And that was such a weird dynamic too, because it's like, well, they're not really allowed to like get a job. Obviously they've had to like leave the family, like and denounce the royalty essentially at this point, just to write a book and make some income on their own. You know what I mean? Like they're not allowed to work, but then the dad's being like, well, there's not enough money to get married, but like it's just
He's
so weird.
Charles is jealous of the press that they're getting
Yes.
because Meghan is so lovable and the public
Yes.
loves her. And he has this whole thing about like, I need to be the center of attention and I'm going to be the
Yes,
king.
and Camilla
And
as
he
well.
and Camilla, this is where Camilla really just like,
She
they
lost me.
start leaking stories to the press about Will and Kate and Harry and Meghan like having beef.
Yes. And it's basically like this is where it all starts. Like, well, they can't turn bad press onto William and Kate because they're going to be the king and queen one day. So let's just throw it all on Meghan. Let's throw it all on Meghan, and like that's where it really goes downhill with her relationship to the press because again she is very lovable, and I think in general most people really loved her, and like the general daily public, I don't remember if this is from the documentary or the book, but at some point there was like a moment where Harry realized like, oh, like the average person loves her. It's just the press that's vilifying her. And then there's another moment where he has to go ask his grandma for permission, aka the queen, rest in peace. And she says yes. And he said, this made me sad. I wanted to hug her. I longed to hug her. I didn't hug her, which is like calling back to that anecdote about how she didn't even hug her own son after months of not being there, like a handshake of like, this is like a moment where he was so happy and he wanted to just hug his grandmother and couldn't. So, that, and then there's also a very weird argument because Harry was allowed to keep his beard for the wedding.
Oh my God. It's
And
so stupid.
William's like pissed that he couldn't keep his beard for the wedding because I guess part of like the royal, if you're wearing your Royal Army uniform, part of the uniform is to have a clean shaven face. But he asked the Queen's permission to keep his beard because he knew Meghan liked it and, he was more comfortable with it. And then William's like, well, how dare you get to keep your beard and I don't get to
And he
keep
was
my
like,
beard.
he tried to pull rank, and he was like, as the heir, I'm saying that you can't.
And he's like, well,
Harry
the
was like,
Queen
well, I
said I
already asked
could.
Granny.
Yeah.
So, and then he was like, will you put her in an impossible situation? It's like, it's
a beard.
literally a
Like,
beard.
let's calm down.
Like and this is like indicative of a lot of anger issues that William
Absolutely.
has. So like,
Yeah.
We don't have William's memoir, so I don't know if he's on therapy. But
I'm
like,
gonna guess. No.
because he has taken all of this like stuff and just channeled it into being angry.
Yeah.
Like, really angry and stuff.
And
It's sad.
unfortunately, I think Kate is on that train with him. And then there was some weird thing about the bridesmaid's dress. That was a whole thing with Kate, and I don't really remember the whole details, but this is kind of like where the wedding is really a breakdown between the two couples. And he wrote, I'd always believed, despite our problems, that our underlying bond was strong. I'd thought brotherhood would always trump a bridesmaid's dress or a beard. Suppose not. And that was really sad. So the wedding really seemed like a point where he was like, oh, like, we're not cool. Like, we're not
Again.
friends.
You find liberation and you're labeled as a troublemaker. And
Yeah.
and she gets lumped into that too. Like she becomes the troublemaker. They call her Duchess Difficult.
Yes.
All of this stuff, like, because they're just saying, well, no, like, I'm not gonna be like like I'm not gonna like be like repressed and like have all of these issues just because you guys do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and
like-
unfortunately, I think it is, again, that jealousy because Harry was able to, as this book concludes, leave. He was able to leave. He was able to go, and he lives in California now. Like, he doesn't have any of the pressures of being in the royal family. He's able to do what he wants. He's able to be free from all of that. And, like, William, to whatever extent, can't. Like, he is going to be the king. He is the heir. And obviously he could, but I do think Harry is, for as sad as it is to be the spare and to have that on you your whole life, I think it's also a gift because he's able to leave without real consequence, to like the succession line or whatever. And like William doesn't have that ability. So I think as Harry breaks away more and more, maybe there is some jealousy of like, I wish I could do that, but I never will be able to,
Yeah, it's sad. And Harry and Meghan, or in the book, he says that Harry and Meghan didn't want this. They wanted to get
Yeah.
some distance because the press was doing an unprecedented amount of negative press on
It's
Meghan.
horrible.
Rooted in racism.
I highly recommend
And-
watching. If you enjoy any part of the discussion, watch that documentary or the
Yeah.
docuseries because they go
It does a
into
better
this
job
part
of
a lot
explaining.
more, and you really see like the whole thing of like Kate eating an avocado, and they're like, "Oh, she's so like healthy," or like eating exotic foods, and then Megan eating an avocado, and they're like, "These avocados are." Like a war crime because like they're exploiting
Yeah.
the farmer. It's like
It's a
this is
direct-
insane. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would watch that for more because I don't think the book goes into this part as much as really the documentary does.
I mean, famously, like, they said something like, Harry's new girlfriend's straight out of Compton, which, first of all, she's not.
Like it's just
Never lived in Compton. But
not true.
if she had been, so, like, and then, like,
it's
of
not
course,
funny. It's
when,
just ridiculous. Yeah.
after their first child, Archie, is born,
Oh yeah.
there's, like, a comic going around from a journalist of, like, them holding a monkey in between
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. It's
so
like, look, we're
it's-
not holier than thou in America. We definitely have race problems here, but like, y'all over in England, it's another beast. Like it is oh, it's insane to me the level they went to with Meghan. Like in the journal, in the media, I think especially. Like it is just
Yeah, and I
something
don't
so
think that
different.
I don't think it's really reflective of a lot. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think it's that reflective of a lot of British
I
people.
don't
Like, I
think
think
so
they love
either.
her,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the thing is, the truth is, because of the relationship that the royal family has with the press, they could have stopped it.
Yes.
They
But they
could have
chose not
done
to.
something,
Yeah.
but they chose not to.
Because
And
there would
that's
be
where a lot
weird,
of the pain comes
yeah,
from.
there would be weird stories then about the heirs. So we have to put it on, on them. And now I think they've lost that scapegoat, like I was saying at the beginning of this podcast. And like there are some negative things coming out about the others. And I think, what are they going to do? Who are they going to turn on next?
I know. And like, then you look at, 15, 20 years in the future, like, which of Prince William's
Yeah.
children is going to be the scapegoat? Like,
Yeah,
who are they going to throw under the bus? Charlotte
exactly.
or Louis, whatever. So, like, unless something really dramatic changes. So,
Yeah.
Harry describes like they're finally like we want to get out, like, but we'll go to Canada or Australia or New Zealand or South
Yeah.
Africa or somewhere where we can still serve the Queen, but we'll have some distance from the press and
Yeah.
whatever. And they're like, no, sorry, you're just
Yeah.
out.
I think, again, this part might be conflating with the documentary and what's in the book, but they described that they had like five different scenarios, and like four of them were like to continue to work for the Queen, like just different levels of engagement. And then one of them was completely, and they like leave, and neither of them wanted to do that, but that was I think they were trying to force their hand and say like you're not really going to leave, but so like we're only going to give you that option. So then you end up just not doing anything. But like we said earlier, he was not going to let, Megan was really struggling with like suicidal ideation and like wanting to end her own life, and he wasn't going to let that happen. So he said, I
Yeah,
love
while
my
she was pregnant.
yeah, while pregnant. He said, I love my mother country and I love my family and I always will. I just wish at the second darkest moment of my life they'd both been there for me. And I believe they'll look back one day and wish they had too. That was really sad. Like he didn't want to go. He loved his
He didn't want to
family.
go.
He loved his country. He wanted to continue to serve the queen. Like that, like you said, he continues to think that the monarchy is a good thing. Like he it's not like he was like, this is all dumb. It was just like, this is the only option you've given me.
Exactly. So that's what they do. They leave. And, if you're familiar with some of the media that's out there, they pull their security.
Hmm.
Tyler Perry ends up being
Which is
part of this.
insane. They pulled their security at a time, like, I did not, when I first read that story, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I guess. But then learning more about it, you're like, there was literal, like, press, like, sneaking into their property, like, at their front door. Like, there were people all around them. And it was like at the exact moment, I think, that their location had been leaked, that they decided to pull their security, which is unhinged. And even their security was like, there are an unprecedented number of threats towards you guys right now. I don't feel comfortable leaving you, but I have to
But, like,
do.
what are we going to do?
Yeah. So, like, like the press, I think the press is so easy to be like, well, it's just, a headline, who cares? But it directly contributes to people, like, they describe, we didn't talk about this, but at their wedding, there had to be snipers on the rooftops because there was death threats towards Meghan that were deemed to be credible. Like the negative press directly leads to unhinged people wanting to kill you. So like,
We know about that in America.
yeah.
Like, January 6th. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, no,
for
literally.
real.
Press and the media have a lot of power and they can lead to violence if not, done responsibly. So they do leave. And good for them.
So that kind of brings us up to date.
There was
He,
there was one part too where Megan, she's like writing in her journal and then she reads it to him, and she just says, "That is not a spare." I was crying.
this is, yeah, so this is after Lilibet
See if
is
I can
born.
find the actual passage. Yeah, after she gives birth to their daughter, their second child. Hold on, I gotta find this.
In America.
In America.
Because at this point, they're living in Montecito,
Yes.
California, where they live now.
She said, um, she had written down her thoughts after giving birth. And so she read them to him. And she said, "That was everything. That is a man. That is not a spare." Like how she just sees him for who he is, like you said, like the whole thing in Botswana, like she just sees him as a person and not as a spare, which everyone else in his life has always kind of seen him as, and so that was a really nice
And
way to end it.
it's unfortunate that he had to give up so much to find that, but
Yeah,
the truth is that he has found that, and it's a lovely way to end the story.
yeah.
Oh, and then, oh my gosh.
Epilogue.
So,
Yeah.
well, did we talk about the hummingbird thing?
Oh
The
no.
ornament thing?
Oh my
Oh my
God.
gosh. So, okay. So they're at their house in California,
This was insane.
and they're like putting up their Christmas tree, and Megan's like, haha, look, I got you a little ornament of the queen. And he's like, that's cute, whatever. So they hang it up, and then Archie is like, their son is like a baby. He's like pulling on the tree, and the ornament falls and breaks. And then he's like, let's fix it or whatever. They're like, oh no, Archie, we can't fix it, whatever.
It's kind of funny.
So it's like, haha, weird, whatever. Anyways, like
This
a
was before
couple.
she died, just to be clear.
This is before the queen died.
They're not
So
like
it's not like,
LOL.
yeah, this is before she died.
Okay.
So then, like, for some reason, he's like seeing like a psychic or like a medium or something.
Fair.
And she like retells him the story of the ornament. And she's like, your mother was there. And he's like, she's with you. And he's like, yeah, I know she's with me. And he's like, no, she was there. Something about an ornament breaking, a mother or a grandmother, and then your baby trying to fix it or
Yeah.
something like that. And she was like, she thought that was cute and funny.
And you're like, what the?
Like, she's there. Anyways, that was really sweet. It was just like, she must, like, if that's true, whatever, she must be so proud of,
Yeah.
like, what he's built and what he's done, and sad to see, like, the
Yeah.
breakage of his
Of
relationship
the
with
two
William.
brothers, yeah.
But
I,
it's sweet.
I think that hopefully, like, maybe one day they could become brothers again and have a close relationship. I don't know. But then there is also an epilogue at his grandmother's funeral and like him going back after all this has happened. And obviously that was added, I think, after the original book was completed because that was pretty recent. But that's the part where he like sees the hummingbird and he like saves it and he tries to set it free and it kind of just stays there for a second. But then he's like, no, please, like, don't die. Come on, like, you're free, fly away. And then, against all odds and all expectations, that wonderful, magical little creature bestirred itself and did just that. And that's how it ends. That was really nice. Whoever goes for
Really
this
nice.
book, you really ate that ending.
You really ate that ending,
That was
Ghost
so
Rider.
good.
I mean, I
genuinely cried. I'm not gonna lie. I was like
I
crying
did too.
reading this
I
book.
cried at the end. I think, look, my journey in life has not been remotely close to this, but
No.
I also understand, like, finding a level of freedom in,
And
like,
moving to Los Angeles.
yeah, or just like
Like you too moved to
Charting-
California to be
starting my own path,
yeah.
or like having the bravery to, transparency moment, but like having the bravery to like choose my own happiness with someone that I love over
Yeah.
expectations
Yeah.
about what I should do or who I should be. And like the amount of like loneliness but also like peace
Yeah.
and like freedom, and I just love that for him. I'm so happy, and I loved this book. I would love, like, going forward, like, all right, we've gotten like a lot of content from you guys about like the story and everything for sure. I'd love to see like more stuff about like what you're doing, maybe next for them, like a documentary of them in Botswana, like doing something about conservation, or like,
Yeah, I think they should do a travel tour company, and I would want to go because Botswana sounded really cool.
yes, like they should do more like media and awareness about conservation,
Yeah.
and about like some of the other causes they really care about. Megan really cares about like feminism and stuff
Yeah,
like
like
that,
women's
issues.
empowerment. Yeah, and they did stuff with the vaccine rollout, mental health stuff they've done a lot with. So I'm excited. Like I'm happy for them. I think there is like again, they obviously have an incredible amount of wealth and privilege, and that goes without saying, right? But like it's also hard because like they can't go work at Starbucks. Like be effing for real. Like they
Like you
can't go get a
go work at
job.
Salesforce.
Yes, they can't. So like they have to make do with what they have. Like they do talk about some real moments of like financial uncertainty in this, and I think that's hard to imagine for someone so wealthy, but like when you have to provide security for your family, you have to get a house. You can't move into a neighborhood in a cul-de-sac. You have to get a house that has some level of security and privacy. Like, let's just be real about this. Like, so
Yeah,
there
like
is no
you
going
there's a certain
back.
amount of
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of wealth that's and money, income that is required for like
Just to keep
keeping you
yourself safe.
safe.
Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously they have a lot of privilege, but I think they also have had to be strategic about what they do to continue to make money for themselves now that they have been fully cut off from the royal family. And so, and obviously Meghan like stopped acting to get married and try to do this. And so, I would love to see her like I think she used to have a blog. I would love to see her come back into something like that. Like, I think she seems like a very likable person. And anyways, like I'm rooting for them. This
I
book
would
is
love to
really
see
endearing.
I would love to see them like on the topic of Africa, like conservation for sure.
Yeah.
I'd also love to see them do some media about like how what are they trying to do to repair the things that his family has done to colonize
Yeah,
Africa?
would love that as well.
I think like that could be a next like
Yeah,
I
why
think
not?
I get it. I get the importance of the Oprah interview and the documentary and the book to tell their
Yeah.
side of the story and get that out there. I love it. I would love to see some stuff like now like I'm on board. I'm in on your team. Like
Yeah.
now lead me to somewhere else too.
Yeah. Well, that was a long episode.
It really was. I hope you're still here. If you are, that you've enjoyed this conversation. Do you want to hit on a book you've read recently that you'd recommend?
Yeah, yeah, just really quickly. This is non-traditional, but it is a fan fiction. Yeah,
Is this Peeta's
it's
Games?
freaking Peeta's Games, okay?
Oh my
And I
gosh.
went back and forth, like, should I count this towards my reading goals for the year? But honestly, it is the length of a book, so I'm not gonna be stupid. And also, it's on Storygraph. They have the Peeta's Games, and they have the whole series. By the way, there's three of them.
Oh,
This should be a
okay.
book.
Can you redrop the link for me? I know I sent it
Yeah.
to you originally, but can
I'll,
you
I'll
send it
put
back to
the
me? Because
link in the show notes and I will send it to
okay.
you.
'Cause I
Um,
think I'm gonna print it.
yes.
Okay.
It's because it's not super long. I think the Storygraph equivalent said it was like 180 pages. So it's like a short book, but that's a book, man. This person, they did the work. So basically, Peeta's Games is the Hunger Games retold from Peeta's perspective.
A
And
la Midnight Sun.
a la Midnight Sun, but mm, like light years more readable than Midnight Sun. Which is hot garbage. It might be better than the actual Hunger Games, which I haven't read in a while, so like I need to go back. But it is so well done. It adds, like, she takes references from the book, so it's super grounded, but it adds so much more like context. Like the opening scene is like Peeta wrestling in school, which apparently I forgot that tidbit, but it is
Oh yeah,
mentioned that
that's
he was like a
right.
wrestler and how he locks eyes with Katniss in the crowd and how the whole scene about him giving the bread to her, like you get that perspective. It is so good. Like his side of the Hunger Games, what his like view was of everything, and it is genuinely so well done. You would think it is actually by the same author because it does not. It is written in the same style. She uses dialogue directly from the original books, like any moments where Peeta was having dialogue, like she keeps it the same, but then obviously expounds on all of that. I am so excited to read the other two books in the series. It is so good. It's called Peeta's Games. Let me get the author's name. Like she needs to be an actual author by Igsygrace, and I have not read fan fiction since middle school, but I saw this on TikTok and then Abigail told me about it as well. And I'm like, I have to give this a try. And it was so good. I couldn't stop reading it. So if
I
you
think I
like the
told you
Hunger
about it, and I
Games,
haven't even read it
yeah.
myself.
If you're Team PETA, I mean, it's just so good. Like his perspective of like what it was like to believe that Katniss was falling for him and then to find out it was part of her strategy
Oh
and to
no.
think about how he's thinking about Gale. Like he's wondering what's the deal with that and his family dynamic, which is really complicated. It's all in there. So Highly, highly recommend. Highly recommend.
Okay, I'm gonna have to.
If you're Team PETA and you like the Hunger Games, yeah, you got to read this.
I'm excited about that.
What about you?
Well, okay, I've actually read a lot of books this year so far. I've read
Nice.
16 books.
Oh my God. That is a lie.
I don't know, like how
Wow.
I've done that. In January, let's see. Yeah, I've read 16 books.
Flex.
So I'm trying to pick one. I didn't think about this before the episode.
Yeah, that's okay.
Um, Okay, one of the books I read, so for fans of The Guest List, which is a thriller by Lucy Foley, is on like Reese's Book Club. I think it's probably her most famous, her most popular book.
Yeah.
I read that one, but I also read The Paris Apartment, which is another thriller by Lucy Foley, which is told through the perspective of like multiple different people, and each chapter rotates based on like to different perspectives. But it is a really fun story. Well, there's murder in it, so it's not that fun. But all of her books are about British people. So if you like,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of on like a British thing right now. But it's about a girl who is going to meet up with her brother at his flat in Paris, and when she gets there, he's gone, and there are some clues left around, and she doesn't know where he could be, and she learns about the different neighbors in the apartment and their relationship to him, their relationship to one another, as she sets out to solve the mystery of his disappearance.
Interesting.
And it's really good. I feel like it's
Sounds
a really
good.
quick read. The chapters are short, which I love. I love a short chapter book.
Yeah, me too.
So anyways, I would recommend. I gave that one 4 stars.
Nice. Well, I really like The Guest List, so I need to check that one out.
Yeah, she wrote The Paris Apartment, and I also read The Hunting Party, which is the same format. I liked that one the least, but I still thought it was really good. So,
Well, there you go.
yeah.
Bye.
Bye, everybody!